I'm glad we learned that melody this past year. This from Cantor Scher, the idea of praying once again to be whole and thinking about who we are as individuals and our loved ones, but also the idea for our people, our land, and folks of every race and nation. That is my prayer. Some of us need a physical healing. Some of us seek emotional healing. But there's also this healing of humanity and moral injury that we encounter when we see so much hurt in the world. And yes, this is a yahrzeit for Pittsburgh. And I just can't believe it's a year already. So I'm looking for healing and wonder, how do we do it? There's a reading that I shared with you. Hopefully many of you, as you entered, took another piece of paper. On the front and back, there's a reading. It says, "Renew our days as old." There's a back and forth. I'm going to start. I invite you to read along in the italics. "From the depths we cry out to you, dear God, for you are with us in our straits. Hear the blood of our brothers and sisters as they shout out to us. A year has passed, but the pain subsists. We are not the same. Dear Pittsburgh, we are with you in your sorrow. We are responsible one for the other. Comfort the mourners who grieve the loss of their loved ones, their friends, those who unite to establish synagogues for prayer, and those who enter them to pray. Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, may our memory of them, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger, may our memory of them be for a blessing. God, Creator, brighten us with the light of the first day and dispel this darkness. Renew within us our divine image of the sixth day, which fashioned and governs our humanity. Teach us to banish evil and know good, our distinction from the beasts acquired. Care for the wounded of body and spirit. Enable them, us, to heal and regenerate as Adam and Eve did in the face of unbearable loss. Restore the American Jewish innocence lost. Bless those who did not stand idly by while their neighbor's blood was shed, who ran toward and not away. Yea, though we walked through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for thou art with us. Amen. Congregations around the country are sharing this prayer from the American Jewish Committee. I think it is significant to share in that kind of solidarity, and still my heart breaks the idea that the sanctuary and the social hall behind us and the lobby behind us and the religious school wing behind the lobby was filled when we were remembering what happened in Pittsburgh, coming together, and so many people from a wider community came and joined with us as an act of solidarity and an act of prayer and an act of fellowship and an act of human compassion and empathy. I want to share another reading. It's an acrostic that another contemporary writer of liturgy wrote. It's called the Tree of Life, Pittsburgh Tree of Life, because the acrostic spells that out, one piece after the other. I didn't give it to you, but I can share it after. Tree of Life, Pittsburgh Tree of Life, in response to the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. Prayer for the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Tree of Life, revive our souls, enrich our days, entreating your blessings. O God of peace, fill our hearts with comfort, letting your Torah shine in the fullness of our love. Faith in you, our God, eternal source of blessings. Prayer for healing in the depths of despair. Thanking God for the survivors. Thanking God for the first responders. sorrow crushing our hearts, bereaved beyond belief, united in our love, returning to you in faith, God of Israel, healer of generations. Tree of life, Redeemer of Israel, enliven this moment with healing. Enliven this moment with hope. O Rock of Israel, forget not the Jews of Pittsburgh. Let your love flow in the days ahead for justice and for peace everlasting. You know, at the time of the Pittsburgh shooting, at the same time, that same week, Maurice Stollard and Vicki Jones were shot in a grocery store in the parking lot of a Kroger in Kentucky after the shooter couldn't get entry into a Black Baptist church. Where do we put all of this? It's not just about us, but we remember those of our community, but we can't just remember our own because we're part of something and one's bigger and greater. Whether in Kentucky or Georgia or Colorado, when there's hurt, then we have to reflect and think and share our humanity. But then what do we do then? A couple of days ago, Deborah Lipstadt, she's a historian of the Holocaust and of anti-Semitism. She's a scholar of Jewish history at Emory University. She wrote a piece in the foreword, it was just a couple of days ago, and she was reflecting not just about Pittsburgh and the yahrzeit this Shabbat, but also an attempted massacre in Halle, Germany, where a gunman was inspired by what happened in Pittsburgh and what happened at the mosque at Christchurch in New Zealand. And he tried to gain entry into this German synagogue on Yom Kippur with intentions to open fire. And unable to enter, he tried elsewhere to fire off his hate and still kill 2 people. And Lipstadt, Dr. Lipstadt's, her reflection on Hal and the anticipation of the Tree of Life and the remembering that we're doing, she wrote her piece called The Best Way to Fight Anti-Semitism, ? Jewish Joy. That's her response. And it was just what I needed to be reminded of. And it's kind of funny because I've given that sermon before. We respond with joy, we respond with love and with mitzvot, but sometimes it's so easy to forget because we're hurting and we're sad and we're angry of all of this hardship. Lipstadt, she says something very dramatic in this article of hers. She says, as much as I worry about what the anti-Semites might do to Jews, I worry even more about what we might do to ourselves because of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, she says, renders the Jew as object. What is done to Jews? It aligns Jew as subject. What Jews do. And then she shares this really interesting story. She says, I was reminded of this recently when a young man who had been my student for a couple of years showed up in my office wearing a kippah, something he had never done before. Though tempted to ask, hey, what's up with the headgear? Which sounds a little bit like me. I thought it inappropriate to do so. I think that was a good choice on her part. And then she says, we discussed his paper and his post-graduation plans, and as he rose to leave, he turned to me, and with a degree of enthusiasm, he pointed to his head and he asked, did you see the kippah? And feigning a degree of nonchalance, I responded, oh yes, that's new, isn't it? And he quickly and proudly proclaimed that in light of recent attacks on Jews, he was intent on showing the perpetrators that they could not frighten him. This is my response to those who hate us, he said. And then she wrote, I said nothing, but my feelings were decidedly mixed. I was proud of his chutzpah, his moxie, his refusal to cower in the face of threats, though he was facing none personally. But my heart broke, she said, because his motivation to identify as a Jew was prompted by the haters. He had ceded to them power over his identity. When they spoke out or acted against us, he upped his Jewish identity. He was motivated by the oi of Jewish life and not the joy. It's a clever sentence, but there's something powerful about that. He's motivated by the oi and how people are out to get us, and not the richness and love and sensibility and values of what we have inherited and what we've been passing down. It was an affirmation of Jewish life in the face of a potential death. And so I also find that to be valuable, but we're missing a mark if we are Jewish because we are anti-Semitism. There has to be more. We are a wandering group of nomads who became a slave people, who experience the sweetness of liberation, and who seek redemption always. Redemption for ourselves, redemption for our people, yes. Redemption for every human being to be embraced by the wings of God's holy presence. We celebrate our solemn text by dancing with it. Isn't that amazing? Simchat Torah, making circles around this space, we were dancing with the Torah, and it seems so unlike us, the frozen chosen who sit in our seats and kind of listen and stand when you're told to. Here we were dancing with it. We celebrate our children by lifting them up on chairs and dancing with them as they enter adolescence, not really thinking what's ahead of us. But we dance with them. We celebrate Passover with food and drink. And I'll tell you, I have this facsimile of a Haggadah from the 15th or 16th century. And it's my favorite Haggadah, although I never use it, because it's in a fancy book and it's this fancy facsimile and people study it. But my favorite part of this ancient text isn't the text. It's the wine stains. Because I imagine these 15th or 16th century Jews singing, Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, and banging on the tables just like in my house, and the table was shaking and they spilled their wine. How come we don't celebrate that? We tell you when to stand and sit. Aren't we more than that? Can't we say that Judaism is more than that? Can we bring joy, not just obedience? Can we bring love and actions and grace and mercy? Not just, is it part of Jewish law or not? I want to say one other thing. And I say this to you often, probably once a month, which is okay, because you change your seats. It's fine. Lo tuchal lehitalem. You must not remain indifferent. That's a typical translation. We can't remain indifferent. But it's this lehitalem is much more than being indifferent. It's about disappearing. And sometimes when we're not so sure about what's going on, we kind of disappear. When I don't know what to say, I don't say anything. And if I'm feeling a little vulnerable, I kind of step back. And in American Jews, a lot of us didn't grow up going to synagogue all of the time, and I'm not expecting you here every single week necessarily. You expect me here, but that's fine. But how do we bring it a part of our lives so we don't disappear? Because when we disappear, we are losing the ability to pass something tremendous, not just down, but to the sides. You're my teachers. Hopefully I get to teach you something too. It's not just vertical. It's not just another generation and waiting for them to catch up and hopefully they catch something. No, it's all around. It's above, it's below, it's to the side and the other side. It's in the front and the back. We are always passing something, but we can't disappear from Jewish life in the synagogue or outside of the synagogue. That's true. And I'll tell you why. I feel that much stronger about it because the synagogue when I was first ordained, Congregation B'nai Israel in Bridgeport, Connecticut, today had bomb threats and was evacuated. 2 bomb threats. Dogs came in, police came in, the mayor came, the chief of police came, Jewish clergy came, Christian clergy came, Muslim clergy came, all in solidarity, and tonight, like us, they're in their sanctuary praying. The folks in Halle, Germany, when that terrorist couldn't enter and the police wouldn't let them out because the area wasn't secured, what did they do inside the sanctuary? They kept praying and singing and learning. Lo tuchal lehitalem, can't disappear. And we can't remain indifferent. They stayed inside and they kept saying their prayers and singing their songs and learning their Torah, we can do that too. So, here's what I suggest. You can take it or leave it. I have thoughts about that, by the way. That for every anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish act, we return with a greater resolve to observe another mitzvah. We will not just complain or make another Jewish joke, but are going to make a Jewish choice that can change the world. We will show greater support for Israel. We will be more generous to agencies that reflect our values. We will be more generous to the agencies that support our Jewish community. We'll be inspired to light Shabbat candles at home, invite our non-Jewish neighbors to celebrate with us as we reclaim our truth to be an or legoyim, a light unto the nations. We will become ambassadors for light and warmth and tolerance and mutual respect, because when the Baal Shem Tov taught us, we have to take it to heart. When we find ourselves in a dark room, we might try to chase out the darkness with a broom, instead light a candle. For every act of vandalism against the synagogue, we will show up in our own synagogue. For every attack, we are going to convene. For another attack against Israel, we're going to plan our next trip to Jerusalem. We will be waving the flag for Birthright Israel for our other young adults, and we will raise our resources to send our teens for the summer or for a semester. For every slur against the Jewish people, we will advance the rule of law and fight discrimination. We will speak out against racism and homophobia and sexism. We will strive for greater inclusion and deepen our interfaith relations with our neighboring churches, mosques, temples, and holy places. And we will answer ignorance, indifference, and untruths with emet, with truth, one of God's names, with truth that comes from the tree of life. And in that tree of life, our Torah and that synagogue, that is where not only we will strengthen our roots, but also bring fruit out into the world.